Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to day 5 of National Arts and Health Week, Nigeria. Thank you for being here. I'm Liz, a Global Arts and Medicine Fellow, and I'll be monitoring the chat today and introducing our hosts. So today's session is a 1-hour conversation on mental health, creativity, and resilience, focused on my dear mentor, teacher, and friend, Kunle Adewale's book, ATUNBI, The Grit, the Guts, the Glory. Kunle Adewale is an award-winning Nigerian artist, founder of the Global Arts and Medicine Fellowship, and author of ATUNBI, The Grits, the Guts, the Glory. Also joining us is Dr. Gbonjubola Abiri. Dr. Abiri is a consultant, a psychiatrist, and a mental health specialist. Today, they'll be leading us in a conversation around mental health, resilience, and creativity. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Kunle Adewale and Dr. Abiri.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that wonderful introduction. And it's always a delight to connect with Dr. Gbonjubola to really have this very rich conversation on mental health. Mental health is a very big deal for me. And Dr. Abiri, it's good to be connected with you again. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kunle. It's great to be here. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the warm welcome. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. And this is going to be kind of like very informal conversation. So it's not really, it's going to be more of conversation between myself and Dr. Gbonjubola, and then we'll also be able to ask you if you want to, make your input or want to add anything or want to ask us any question. Definitely you can go ahead and just ask. And then I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Gbonjubola. Over to you, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kunle, for, first of all, the invitation and for, having me on the platform. Again, thank you to Elizabeth, who has, facilitated the conversation so far. When Kunle reached out to me to, have this conversation, and he said, oh, we're having the, National Arts in Health Week in Nigeria. And that one of the things that we wanted to spotlight was, talk about the book ATUNBI. And Kunle was saying, will you be able to? And I'm like, Kunle, turn down for what? I can't turn it down. It's you. You do a very, amazing work. And, of course, I never fail to remind you about how very proud and inspired I am by the work that you do. You may not hear it a lot, but I think it's nice that you're hearing it again. And so well done so far. I see that this is day 5. And so I know for certain that a lot of amazing work has been going on, with all the days and with all the conversations that have been going on so far. And I know that today will not be different, because we would also be, putting together, I wanted to say, tearing apart the book, letting people see the beauty that is the book, letting people see, not just your life written through that book. A lot of people already see, your life, the beauty of your life, how it is that you impact. I was listening to Elizabeth's talk, and Elizabeth was saying, my mentor, and I'm like, well, yeah. And so we would move from the person to the book. And of course, we'll see the guts, the grit, and the glory again. So it's amazing to be here. And I thank you very much for the opportunity. And so I honestly, since you've handed over the mic to me, I think that, a great place to start will be to talk about, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, please.
Okay, fantastic, because I see that the video is frozen. Yes.
You can turn it on and turn it off, and then that
okay.
Up and turn it on, then probably will change.
Right.
All right.
So I think that, a good place to start would be to tell the story of how I, came about Kunle, how I met Kunle, and, how I have been introduced to and very involved with Kunle's work. I met Kunle about 2 to 3 years ago at a church program where, the conversation on that day was largely about domestic violence. And, I saw this very young, inspiring and enthusiastic young man speak very passionately and very boldly about the topic at hand on that day. Our conversation didn't end at that, because we further went on, and I wanted to know, I was curious to know, who is this guy? What drives him? What motivates him? What's bustling? It's art, but let's see what, he wants to say about art. And so because of that, we furthered the conversation, and I found out that he wrote a book. I'm like, wow, do you know how many books I've tried to write and I haven't successfully done, and I'm still trying to write, but Kunle has written a book. And so I requested to have that book. And when I haven't read a book like that in a long time. I'll be very honest with you. Within 2 days, I finished that book cover to cover. I'm like, wow, it is unputdownable. As in, Kunle took us on a ride with a lot of emotions, a roller coaster, pretty much, if I would put it that way. But it also made me appreciate, the person that you have become, your journey. Because again, a lot of times people see the success, but they don't realize that there's been a lot of stories beyond all of that success. And I think that it's extremely inspiring that you were very vulnerable, you were very courageous, and you were open enough to share your own story with the world. I dare say, of course, that everyone here has a story within them. But until we tell our stories to the world may never be able to see us through, any other means than the individual that they see. So, Kunle, I'll push it back to you. But again, those are my introductory remarks per this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Dr. Gbonjubola, for that very powerful brief intro into ATUNBI as a book. And also, while you were speaking, for me, I mean, I didn't know that first time connection with you would transcend into this beautiful relationship. And I think a relationship, I think, is very important. It's capital, and I think probably that's going to be part of this conversation today as we're thinking about even resilience, creativity, and what that means. I will connect the dots in our journeys to be able to navigate, all of the life's ordeals and the barriers that life brings our way, and how do we overcome all of them. In 2020, during COVID, I know COVID affected many of us. So during COVID, I was having serious mental health problem in California, in San Francisco, where I was doing my program on the Global Brain Health Institute program. And then during that time, I couldn't fly back to Nigeria because, prior to that time, my first son was born December 5th. I flew into Nigeria in 2019. And then 7 days after, or 10 days after, I flew back to the US, and the COVID happened. And then I couldn't travel back home. And then it felt like the world was coming to an end. And then, it was very difficult not being able to step outside the house. And then I started thinking about my life. What is going to happen next? Then I feel like, one of the coping mechanisms that developed then was writing. I said, why can't I just write my memoir? So I wrote my memoir in COVID. I wrote it because during that period, we complain of there's no time. COVID gave us enough time to do anything you want to do with your life. COVID said, you know what, you'll be complaining. Now do something with your life. And there's no excuse, right? So I used that opportunity to write my memoir, published it, and put it on Amazon. And, reflecting on my journey, I think it's just very, very important. I mean, just like what you also said as well, many of us, we have unwritten books, within us, and we're always like, oh, I will. Oftentimes I tell people, tomorrow's not promised, say tomorrow's not promised, to say you're not in charge of tomorrow. So whatever you want to do tomorrow, start doing it today, action it, execute it. So, and the intention of sharing my story was in a way that through my life, other people can actually find light for their journey. People can find light for their path. People can find inspiration to be able to navigate, life challenges, rejections, and whatever thing that they actually faced with, to be able to develop capacity to be able to move forward regardless, in a way that you will never blame your shortcomings or your life limitations on economic situations surrounding or economic factors around the country where you were born or where you're resident, to say, oh, because I'm in Nigeria, that is why my life is like this. Actually, your life is like that because you want it to be like that. It's not because of the country. So we are all product of the choice that we've made. And then the factors around us are not really, they are not enough to determine our future design. So our desire, our determination are actually the designs. They are just those texture, the diagram that leads to where we're going. What do you think about that?
So very well said as an artist. I mean, you had to put pictures, you had to put diagrams. Yes, very well said as an artist. And there's something that kept speaking to me every time in your book. And it is that quote that you kept saying. I said, Kunle reminds us constantly through his book that where and how you were born is not as important as why you were born. Every time I see it, every time I'm thinking it, I'm like, this is word. And you've rightly said it. It's rather unfortunate that, a number of people generally may, limit themselves by their own thoughts, by their own beliefs about themselves, and then go on to cultivate behaviors that limits their thinking abilities and limits their, potentials for growth. And so you're very right. Many things will deter us. Many challenges will show up. Many, things spokes will be thrown in our wheel of progress. However, it's important to be determined to look beyond our present situation and circumstances to where it is that we want to get to. I think that, one thing that I should also speak about at this point, in addition to what you've just rightly said, is that, Kunle, you went through a lot. You went through a lot. And, in spite of going through a lot, what you did was that you maximized your potentials and minimized your difficulties. So you had difficulties, you had obstacles, but you went ahead to say, you know what, nothing is going to stop me. You were like a moving train, and you were like, anything in my, in my way, we're just going to knock it off. And you haven't stopped. I'll be honest with you. You refuse to let the trauma that you experience define you. And I think it's extremely commendable. One of the many things I always say is that Kunle, and for everyone on the call today to listen to, Kunle is an epitome of love. Because what Kunle has done, love, kindness, and compassion. Because, Kunle could have said, man, this happened to me. Everybody should just go and sit down. But no, Kunle said, I will take this and I will be that light that would give light to everyone else. He would be that candle that loses nothing by lighting up everyone else. And so what Kunle, and, I'm happy that you're here. We always say that let's give you your flowers when you're still here. You're an epitome of love because you have continue to dedicate your life to helping others in spite of your tumultuous background. And it is extremely commendable. It's extremely inspiring. And, it's something that I also will continue to, appreciate and advocate for in my own life. So it's interesting that you decided to put down this memoir when you had time. But then again, I want to ask you, Kunle, and so I'll bring it back to you. It's not everyone who goes through an experience like this that wants to tell it. They're like, how many people do I want to tell I lived in Mushi? How many people do I want to tell that I lived under that staircase, in such difficult circumstances? Why did you still feel like you needed to tell us that story, in spite of the fact that it may not have looked so, attractive at the time?
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate you. I think it's just very important for us to tell our stories because I feel like personal narratives are very powerful, because sometimes when people tell your story, the tone at which they speak or tell the story will be different from the tone you're going to use. So I feel like it's more like a second voice. So no voice can be like your voice, and your voice is very powerful. So I decided to tell my story, number one, because I feel like personal narrative is very important in storytelling. And personal narrative kind of help people to really be able to connect on a deeper level with the author. I think it's just very important. It's not just on a surface level, but rather kind of connect to the soul, because I feel like also it feels like it's very authentic. So there's authenticity that comes with you telling your story, yourself. And then I decided to go that route. I also kind of recognize the limitation that comes with life's uncertainties, put it that way. Like I said, tomorrow is never promised. So sometimes we say, I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to write this tomorrow. I'm going to sing this tomorrow. And then there are many people who have said they're going to do something, and then they never realized that. They didn't get to do it. So I feel like, just being able to do it, I think it will help many people, like I said before, in their journeys. It will help them to be able to find light and be encouraged. And I also feel like many people will find my story relatable in a way, because I feel like sometimes You know, when I was growing up, I was somebody that fell in love with reading books. I started buying books because I became very, very hungry. My hunger for change was driven by hunger for knowledge, because I feel like there's no permanent change that comes without hunger for knowledge, because knowledge is power, but applied knowledge empowers. Knowledge gives information, but applied knowledge gives transformation. So what I've done through my life is applying knowledge of other people into my life, and that way it's not just being informed, but being transformed. So I want people to read my book, not just to be informed about my journey, but to be transformed by the light and inspirations in my journey. I find it very interesting that, you know, reasons why we are within the limitations that we find ourselves today is because we have not been able to find examples that looks like us. So the day you start finding examples that looks like you start believing the possibilities of the change that can happen in your life. If it can happen in the life of Kunle, then it can happen in my own life. So if it can happen in the life of this person, it can happen in the life of other person too. So I feel like it's just more of thinking about the dimension of what is possible, what is believable, what is available, what's achievable, and then thinking around all of that, but most importantly, mirror that thing. So when people start saying something that looks like them, they mirror it. They mirror it. So we can mirror the positivities in the life of other people. But what we have not seen, we cannot mirror. What we have not seen, we cannot experience. So my intention, why I told my story, is such that people can mirror the possibilities in my life. And I will say this: it is not out of place to mirror the good things happening in the life of other people. It is not out of place. So it is not out of place to be inspired by somebody else's journey, not what they have been through, but the breakthrough also that have come through that. Because again, you will realize that many people have gone through a lot, but nothing came out of it. There are several people that never survived it. But if you find a survivor, then that becomes something that we need to spotlight and shine light on, because going through that challenges, not many people probably will actually make it. So I would probably want to like send it back to you, talking about survivors of life's challenges and trauma and violence and difficult. I mean, sometimes you hear, oh, Nigeria happened to this person. The person just died, right? So many things, several things happen to many of us. And then how do we navigate around the happenings in our life and what we can make happen in our lives and in our journey?
All right, thank you very much, Kunle, for bringing that to me and for, wanting to speak about trauma, largely because, it's a topic I'm quite passionate about. Trauma is instructive because trauma affects an individual's, sanity, stability, security, and sense of safety. And to be honest, no two people's traumatic experiences, even when they go through trauma, the same kind of trauma, are the same at any point in time. And so I dare say, when trauma happens, it's important to identify it, to validate what's going on, to inform and equip ourselves about what has happened to us. But beyond having all that information is to then tell ourselves, I need to be responsive to this trauma. You see, quite a number of times, the reason why people are unable to do anything with their trauma is sometimes we live in a balloon where we believe that nothing can happen to me. Oh, it's happened to someone else, but no, it can't happen to me. It can't come close. But, the earlier we realize that situations may happen to us, not because we hope, pray, believed, wish for it, but because sometimes it's the harsh reality that life can bring your way. And that trauma, traumatic experiences can either be natural, situations, either disasters, a fire, a landslide, an earthquake, or man-made situations. So unfortunate situations like wars, intertribal conflict, rape, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all of this. It's important that, of course, we reiterate that when trauma happens to people, trauma is extremely important. It is something that we must not dismiss. It is something that we must give the attention that it very much deserves. We must listen to the individuals who have gone through it. And so I like, the narrative that you threw back here about how, people feel like Nigeria has happened to them. And Nigeria does happen to people. And other countries also happen to people as well. But, what I've found out and what trauma teaches is that at the end of the day, it's not so much about the events that has happened to you, but what you do about what has happened to you. So trauma pretty much is like, that conversation they will tell you about failure, that failure is a part of life. Failure happens, but failure is not final. And that the defining part of failure is being able to tell yourself that, yes, this has happened, but at this point, I will not have regrets. I will take the lessons. Different people, like I said earlier on when I was speaking, go through different traumatic experiences. And so for some, their lives are traumatic from the very get-go. And I'm sure that, Kunle can attest to this as well. From the get-go, it's trauma. I recall seeing a patient once, and by the time she finished telling me her story, I'm like, wow, this is a trauma-riddled life. It was like everywhere she turned, there was, trauma just showing up and saying, what else can I do to you? And so some people's lives, some people's reality is trauma day in, day out. Some people experience traumatic incidents or situations at certain points in their lives. And some have it rather smooth sailing, such that when trauma eventually shows up, they are shocked to their marrows. They don't know what to do. And so what I would say is, beyond it being a type of job for me or something that I've been very interested in, I've taken courses in trauma. I bought a lot of books in trauma, not because I like trauma, but because I like to be informed. And because I like to be able to help the people who go through traumatic experiences. Again, our responses are different. And those differences are sometimes nature. If we have, family members who have mental illnesses, who have mental health concerns, who have gone through traumatic experiences by themselves, our lives are likely to, again, the mirroring you spoke about, to be mirrored through the eyes of the trauma that they have gone through. And you'd find that around here, it is not the norm per se for people to get support and help when they go through their, traumatic experiences. And so when it's nurture, it's a learned, experience. People go through, learning that, oh, trauma happens. This is what it does to people. These are some of the, mental health implications, the psychological consequences that can happen. But I will tell you, Kunle, and I think it's a conversation that we need to start having more. We need to let people know, including our children, that the world can be a beautiful place, but traumatic experiences can happen. People can be kind. While you can have people who are kind, who are loving, who are generous, and who are beautiful, it's also a difficult world sometimes. It's not to scare them. So again, it's to guide them through knowing what the world can be, but beyond informing them about trauma, to help them to respond, that when a traumatic experience happens, so, people always think that it's until something extremely debilitating, extremely traumatic happens that, will jolt someone back to reality. No, not necessarily so. For some, trauma can be an armed robbery attack, and that is heavy. For some, trauma can be, losing a loved one, and that is heavy. For some, trauma can be failing an exam. For someone who has never failed an exam his entire life, and then it's at a point where he's supposed to get something and he fails, that can be trauma. But whenever we realize that, when our safety, sanity, security, and stability is affected severely, such that it starts to affect, how we enjoy ourselves, our quality of life, our interactions with others, and how well we do our work, it is perhaps then very important to say, you know what, I can't cope with this by myself. Perhaps I should speak to a professional. So that's my own take, on how, as individuals, we can manage trauma. And I think I'll then hand the baton back to you and say, well, Kunle, so you did go through your own fair share of trauma. And, Nigerians will say it was like a Gbas kind of trauma. It was coming from left, right, center. You were just collecting. How would you say you were able to, walk through your trauma, deal with the issues, and rise above it? Or are you still on a journey to, getting through your traumatic experiences? Thank you.
I think the question you're asking is very profound. I thank you so much for your narrative around trauma and dealing with trauma or traumatic situation. And I was going to think about that, how being a young person and having difficulties in my journey in life, and then there's lack of access to resources that could actually support me in my journey. And now I said that earlier on before now that not many people survived it. Not many. Even people who do have access to even resources sometimes do not make it. So for me, I would say there are several factors that I would say play major role in my journey. And I was thinking about this. I will speak about the law process and time. I would say the universe would have me speak on a day like this. It's not a coincidence. So I believe in fate. I believe in the future. I believe in purpose. And I believe in, limitless possibilities. So for me, where I never had access to a professional like someone like yourself. So imagine several young Kunles, thousands of them roaming the street, carrying trauma, but there's no access. So I'm just one lucky survivor in the means of not having access to resource person or resources, on how I can have, mental support, or who I can talk to, or a counselor, right? So I would say the law of time and process, and within the law of time and process are other elements of life, like creativity. I will speak about dimension of creativity because, yesterday we had a conversation on art therapy and how artists should be supported. And we had a psychotherapist and art therapist on board yesterday. And then I was reflecting about the mental health of an artist and having how many persons or how many artists can actually afford a psychotherapist service. So there's that challenge of the affordability of resources and services. But how I dealt with it was more of virtue of intuition within myself to say how I was able to start discovering myself. So self-awareness was one of the major escape for me. When I realized that I'm not my trauma, and I kept telling myself, nobody told me. Is that dimension of self-awareness to say, I am not my parents, I am not where I was coming from, I am me, I'm where I'm going to. So I'm not what happened to me, I'm just me. So having those personal conversations and taking deliberate action to be involved in activities that allows me to be able to deconstruct what trauma has really built around my life. Like it's more like building a cave or a castle or a mansion that in a way could become like barriers in my journey. But I think through creative process, I was able to deconstruct. I was able to rename. I was able to redirect. I was able to find, light in those process, because I realized that, you see, sometimes life is not about trying to get to a destination. Life is a journey. So when you realize that, you see, it's not a destination, so calm down. Your turn will come, your time will come, and when it's your time, and nobody can stop you. So for me, it's more of that self-awareness, acknowledgement, and appreciation for a creative process. So I fell in love with art making. One of the things that happened to me was, I remember that, in my environment, I used to see discarded materials, like discarded, like bottles, plastics, waste materials. But one of the things that happened to me was that I gravitate, towards those materials, and I started giving them a second life. I started putting things together, like remaking, recycling, and not recreating. And I think the concept, and that's why the concept of ATUNBI is a concept of a rebirth, a recreation. I would say to everyone here today, whatever that you think is wrong can be recreated, and can be redirected, and can be right. And I think it's also understanding that there's a lot of creative process that says that even as an artist, sometimes when you paint something, you don't like it, you can't recreate it. You can. So if you don't like what is on the canvas, recreate it. If you don't like what is on the canvas, repaint it. If you don't like what is on the canvas, take your paint brushes, take your paint, do it your way. And whatever you do, become a masterpiece that you have recreated. So in our art, God has given us a choice to recreate the life that we want to live. And I would say that these are dimensions of designs that I actually experienced through the lens of, I would use spiritual dimensions of escape through creative process. Because sometimes when we speak about art, art itself is a spiritual act. It is. So art is not isolated. So I will use when the world was going to be created, a word was spoken and light came. And science has told us that there's no color without light. There's no color without light. So for me, it's about finding light that brings colors. And I pick those colors and I start using them to repaint, to recreate, to redirect my journeys to what I want to see. So I think that's what I would say it is so for me. I don't know what do you think about that?
Beautiful, beautiful depiction, beautiful example. And while you were speaking, I also like to think about myself as an artist as well. And to be honest, there's actually art in everyone. There's art in what we see, what we hear, what we take in through our senses. It only takes a mind that is mindful. I mean, not all of us will have it as fluid as maybe a Kunle has it, or how other great artists also have it. But if, we pay attention, we look at things more intently with a lot more clarity, consciousness, and intentionality, we're also likely to be able to see art, through our eyes. There's a song that, I like, it's a hymn, and it says there's beauty all around. There's beauty in everything. If only we could pay attention and see the beauty in everything. As you were speaking, Kunle, there's this graphic that came to my mind where an individual was kneeling in a circle, didn't have limbs, but even through not having limbs, was drawing an extension of what her limbs would look like. Again, of course, art and creativity gives you wings, it gives you powers. It makes you see beyond the ordinary, beyond the present. And, I of course like to say that art, and what I believe that it did for you, is that it gave you not just a second chance, but many, many more chances. In fact, I'm tempted to call you, the cat with 9 lives, but I believe that even much more than 9 lives. When you were speaking, of course, I also said something. I caught something from what you were saying, and I think it's important to say it, that it's not difficult to see how you have evolved and how you have become the person that you have become and achieve the things that you have achieved. And of course, I know that there's still many more things for you to achieve, because if you could see beauty in your life in spite of your difficult situation and circumstances, I believe that it would not have been difficult to create art even out of scrap that you saw on the road. So again, we go back to the power of the mind of the creative. We are only as, powerful as the power that we give to our thoughts. And what I would like to say, of course, is that our thoughts have power. Our thoughts are like seeds. If we paid more attention to the thoughts in our minds and to the energies that we give these thoughts and to the journeys that we send these thoughts on, I think that, everyone on the call today should think about it. I have thoughts, and those thoughts get life when I think about them and I speak to them. This evening I was speaking to a teenager, and I said to her, she said she has a lot of times when she's thinking negatively about herself, and so she wants to share it with people. And I said, that's the first step, which was pretty much Kunle's first step, being self-aware, being aware of what was going on in his mind. So first of all, identify the thoughts, catch the thoughts. But more importantly, like I told this young lady this evening, you should show yourself a lot of love, kindness, and compassion. And so show yourself kindness with the words that you tell yourself, instead of telling you how you feel like you're a beat down person, how life has dealt with you. And yes, those things are reality. But you see, whether you think that you can or you can't, like Henry Ford said, you're right. So why don't you think that you can? Because your thoughts have power. So extremely important, extremely beautiful analogy that you've given us there, Kunle. And it leads me to my next question. You see, sometimes I feel like the definition of a good book, and I'll tell you, is when I give it to a child and the child is unable to put down that book. And so when I got, ATUNBI from you, the next thing I did was, I'm like, Kunle, no, this material cannot be sitting down. I bought 10 copies and I shared them to family, friends, and even followers on social media. I also gave it to my children, and my children are less than 13. They finished it. In fact, on the conversation this night, my daughter is like, Mom, is that Kunle Adewale, the one that wrote ATUNBI? And I said, yes. I also sent the book to my friends, children in America. And that buzz was also there. So, I'm sort of tempted. I know we've talked about the origin of the book. We've talked about quite a lot. But like, what exactly did you mix in that book? What exactly do you think gives it the feel? Because again, beyond family, friends, I don't know if you recall, but there was a time I told you that I met a young man whose circumstances and situations were similar to yours. And he was beginning to misbehave in school. So this was a child who had been dropped in a private secondary school, left to the parents. They had provided everything that he needed. But unfortunately, this young man was beginning to have what we call externalizing behavior. He was breaking down all the rules. He just wanted some form of negative attention. So first off, how exactly did you write such a beautiful book? Because I know that there are people on here today who are looking at, how they write a book, and how, if ATUNBI has a second part, you know that I will write and I will read rather, and I would buy and I will share it to the world. So please answer that. And again, what would be your message, for young boys like that boy that I spoke about, who is struggling with his identity, with the difficulties that life has thrown his way as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate your generosity in spreading the light. And I think that speaks also about more, it kind of reminds me about a book I read way, way back. And after I read that book, I bought several copies of it and I gave it to families. So I feel like probably it's more like, the universe honoring my seed that I saw way, way back. I read, this was a book written by an American, actually. It was a book on faith, and it really built my faith. And I think, listening to you and to see how you were able to distribute the book, in a way that, it's more of thinking about how can more people have access to this? How can more people be liberated? Because I think sometimes the truth is that when we discover truth, we cannot contain it, we cannot keep it to ourselves, we want to share it. And then we want other people to be liberated, we want other people to be free. But true freedom does not come by just holding knowledge. It's more about sharing knowledge. And I want to appreciate you and commend you for that. I mean, talking about how I wrote my book, for me, I will use this analogy more like if you're trying to build a house, right? And I think many people today are stuck because like, oh, I need to write this, but they feel like they have to write the entire book themselves. This was what I did. I started thinking about my life in phases. I started thinking about it like, what was my childhood like? I started thinking about what was my secondary school like. I could remember them. I'm still a left-handed person. So I try to look at specific events and moments in my lives. And it's difficult to forget. And I have to start picking them. I'll just pen them down. Just one single line. And then by the time I start thinking about that single line, it becomes 3 pages. And I think so sometimes sometimes it's about just starting very small, just writing 1 line, writing 2 lines, using voice notes. And I did that. I used voice notes. I just did different format as long as the book is going to be written and published. And I also kind of employed the service of a professional writer as well, who helped to curate my book into the chapters it became. So she looked at it and said, okay, we need to divide this. And that is not out of place to hire somebody who is more knowledgeable than you even when writing a book. So you can tell your story, but somebody can curate that story in a way that it becomes very beautiful. It's like, it's reminding me of when our parents will ask us to come and support them in the kitchen. Like, so sometimes they ask you to cook, but they were there to actually to give you that helping hand. But you cook the food, right? They give you like tips on how many spoons of salt you need to add. If you put too much salt, then it's going to be something else. So sometimes we need that, professional guidance, even in writing books as well. So for as many people who are considering writing, consider employing the service of a professional writer for guidance as well. Yeah, I think that's, I don't know if there's another side to the question, but I would say that two would be more of, like I said, why you must know why do you want to write the book. Why do you think it's important? And I think that was the question you were asking later on. Why did you write? When I told someone, I said I wrote my memoir, the person looked at me like, how old are you? I said, like, okay, I was 39 when I wrote my memoir. I'll be 43. By the way, my birthday is next week, Monday. So I'll be 43 on 13th of May. So, and then I said, he said, you're too young to write your memoir. I said, you will say I'm going to leave. I'm going to see next year. So sometimes there are many things people have told us that we can't do because they feel like we're too small, we're too young to do such. And I think those are part of the things that sometimes the limitation we impose on ourselves and people around us and say, you're too young to achieve this. So wait till next time. Wait, it is your turn. Actually, it is your turn now. Why? So you can no longer wait. You can no longer wait. Just activate, action it, and do it. So I would say, whatever you have in mind, action it. Whatever you want to do, action it. I will say this, Dr. Gbonju, I was speaking today with one of our fellows who came from India and came to visit me in Manchester. I was so humbled. I've never had anyone from our fellowship visit me in person. And this young lady came all the way from India, and then we had a beautiful conversation, asking me so much questions and everything. And while we're having this conversation, I started seeing many things, and I have to write them down immediately because I feel like they were just things that I can't just allow to go. And I said this, life is not about dreaming, life is about doing. Do you know many of us wake up every day dreaming without doing? In your dreams are intentions. In your deeds or doings are actions. So take action on a daily basis that move you closer to where you want to go. So it's not just about dreaming, it's about doing. So if you're dreaming or you have an intention of having a good life, then start taking action that will make you to have or experience good life. What action do you need to take? We spoke earlier on about like how we connected. You came to Freedom Courts and then we connected. And sometimes life is about that one-time connection, one-time opportunity. And I think it's very important for me. I will speak also about the dimension of that one-time opportunity of when I had the opportunity of being invited to travel to the United States on all expenses paid trip in 2015. I, as a primary school teacher, I don't have the money. I don't have the resources to say I want to travel to the US. Where will I get the money from? But I feel like through what I do, that opened doors for me. And that one time, that one chance has led to several chances. Has led to several chances. From meeting with the US president to doing more things across the globe today. So sometimes we are asking for a second chance. But what are we doing with the first impression, the first time? I think I will probably throw that back to you. What do you think about dimension of the opportunity, the first opportunity, the first impression that people can make to change their own life?
Yeah, Kunle, thank you very much. And regardless of how seemingly successful many of us may find ourselves in life, this question that you've thrown at me, and invariably, of course, to everyone on the call, is one that resonates with everyone, and one that we should all, sit down and think about. Our first opportunities, And every day is always a first opportunity to try again. What are we doing with them? Are we making the best of them? Are we making ourselves promises that, like, like Kunle said, life and like we know, nothing is promised, not even the next minute, not even the next hour, not even tomorrow. And so what we must do, and I would say that, is not only spot opportunities, create them sometimes, and of course, take opportunities when we see them. Louis Pasteur said, and of course I quote, that chance favors the prepared, not just the brave. You can be brave, but not prepared. But you see, when you are prepared and you have an opportunity, you're more likely to be able to make, success out of that situation. And so I am, I said it earlier on and I'll say it again, I'm extremely inspired that you see what some people, some of us, may see and say, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow, I'll get to it some other time. Only like I said it earlier on, like a moving train, just said that, you know what, this one opportunity may never pass, may never come my way again. And so I'll take it. And so, of course, what I want everyone to take is, take the opportunity when it shows up. Take it. It's your time. Kunle had alluded to the fact, there's one popular saying that we have in Nigeria, it's called Emilokon. It is my time. My time is now. And what I always say is, don't let anyone tell you that you can't. Sometimes you are your own defining limitation. You are the one who holds yourself back and tells yourself, I'm not worthy enough. I'm not good enough. It's not yet my time. Maybe, what do I know? What have I achieved? And so if you are telling yourself that, you can imagine that when people tell you anything negative, you're more likely to say, hey, I said it. They're more likely to affirm the negative self-talk or the negative self-prophecy that you've been telling yourself. But if you also tell yourself, yes, if not now, when? If not me, then who? It is your time. Take it. Take any opportunity that comes your way. Grab it, run with it. If you can't do it by yourself, network. Find people who will, breathe life into ideas and visions that you have. But you see, by yourself, even by yourself, you are able to do things. You're much more than you can ever think or imagine. But until you see it, until you, we always say conceive, believe, achieve. Until you conceive it in the mind, again, back to the power of the mind, until you come up with that big idea, that big version of yourself, you telling yourself. I remember many years ago when, Samadeyemi came to the University of Ilorin and he was talking about how, he would stand at the bus stop in Ilorin and he would be thinking about how, he is in front of his mansion and a chauffeur-driven car comes. It wasn't reality just yet, but he was beginning to see those things in his mind. And years later, there's a manifestation of all of those beautiful things. Success starts, first of all, in the mind. If you feed yourself with positive thoughts, with possibilities, and you tell yourself that, yes, I can, then you are more likely than not to see it come to pass. However, if you also put yourself down and you keep reminding yourself of your failures, your obstacles, your challenges, all that you will see through that view lens is everything that is wrong and can never become right. So, Kunle, that's it from here. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm going to hop in here because it looks like we have a few questions in the chat. So perhaps we can open the floor for both of you for a little bit of Q&A. We have about 10 minutes remaining. So I noticed a few questions in the chat directed towards both of you. I'll go ahead and read them out loud for our audience joining us via recording. And if anybody else has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. So we have a few minutes here if you have a personal question for either Dr. Abiri or Kunle. So Josephine asks, Dr. Abiri, how can I have a consultation with you? They want to know about how we go ahead and verbalize that trauma and really transform it into writing, as the two of you had spoken about before. So perhaps you can speak to that question. Okay, so what I've done is I've shared, a private message with the person who sent the message. But I must also commend you for, wanting to share your experiences. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, to be open, and to be honest, regardless. And so I'm happy to connect. Of course, we can also, connect with Kunle, because I feel like, Kunle is a veteran in these matters as well. And we can see how we can, bring life to what it is that you want to speak about. Thank you. Kunle, would you like to speak to that question?
Yeah, I think again that Dr. Gbonjubola has said it. I think it's something that probably can be followed. We can follow up on it. And I think also Dr. Gbonjubola asked a question like earlier on about maybe the question would have been, when do you know it's time to write? And I also think also, yeah, I need us to look at that very well. You know, when my parents were alive, I didn't write my book. Especially my dad. I didn't write the book. I wrote the book. Let me see. Yeah, my mom died 2011. My dad died 7 or 8 years after. Then I wrote the book in 2020 in COVID. So my parents, both of them were not alive. I think so. Sometimes, I mean, there's a law of process and law of time. Some things are better left unsaid. So even though I'm asking you to say your time is now, so there's also a wisdom of time, even in writing. There's a wisdom of time in writing to say, this is a good seed, but this seed will benefit more people when the time is right. So I think just also there's a sensitivity that surrounds our story, our journey, and what we want to share with the world. So I think I recognize that I mean, of course, if my parents were to be alive, probably I would have even sought my dad's permission to be able to probably like go ahead and write it, because I think it also had to connect with my family. So it's not just me telling my story, other family members are involved. So I think it's just being able to. But when my both parents were late, I didn't seek the permission of my siblings. I'm doing it because the permission of the people that I needed were my parents to say, go ahead. So once they were out of the picture, I said, okay, now let's now talk about this. So that for me was more of like also the autonomy and the agency and the voice, because sometimes it's like, I mean, people tell you you can't do this. And sometimes people that tell you can't do something are people that are very close to you, your loved ones. Right. So for me, it's being able to know if the time is right, you will know. You will know your soul that this is right and the time is right and the time is now. But it doesn't mean that you can't start writing now. It doesn't mean that it's when that becomes the public. You know what I mean? Like it's made public. So sometimes some things are it's more like when you plant a seed, before that thing become, visible to the public, is growing underneath the earth. So start growing your story underneath until it's time for it to come to the public. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kunle. And then there's another question in the chat that we have here. Josephine wants to know the best way to purchase your book. So we left a few links in the chat. But Kunle, if you want to touch upon that, just so that our post live viewers can know the best space to purchase your book and support your work.
Yeah, so I mean, when I came back to Nigeria in 2020, before I touched down, many people like, you need to come, and that was when I was coming, like, they needed the version in Nigeria. So we printed about over 1,000 copies were printed, and now they're out of stock. We don't have any again. And then I was supposed to autograph, several copies. So for now, I live in England, and then, everything is actually on Amazon. So I don't think I'm considering reprint. If I'm considering reprint, it would be a better version, a higher version of my memoir, maybe in the next 7 years when I'm 50 years old, God willing. Right? So I hope I will be able to write, more about that. But for now, I don't think I'm planning to do more of printing. I'm also thinking about, several people have spoken to me about turning my book into a movie. Several people have told me, because it's very, very strong. And they feel like, just like what Dr. Gbonju said, like, imagine if I've seen movies that made me cry and made me to think about my journey and my life. And I love stories. I love lived experiences, things that are relatable. They are not fictional. So I'm not a fan of fictional stories. So I love books, but I love books that are actually like lived experience of people, because I feel like I said, we can mirror the possibilities in the life of other people, but I'm willing to see case examples. So not make believe, but case examples. But I feel like my own journey was just one of those classic case examples that people can look at and mirror the possibilities, right? So And I'm thinking about also like maybe having a version in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, and other languages. Those are things I'm considering. In fact, recently I spoke with a publisher. We wanted to publish an animation version of my book that is more like illustration based. It's illustration based. It's not text. So it's just more like it's simplified in a way that if you're flying, you read, you're done reading the book. It's just illustration based. So again, this is the power of storytelling. Storytelling software doesn't have to be all text, but they can actually be illustrated. It could be images, but it can be readapted. So again, it's just the power of creative process and creativity in telling our story. So those are things I'm actually like thinking about, right?
Amazing. Well, I'm sure that myself and everybody who's on the call today and our participants after who are watching this recording will follow you on your social media and what you're doing with the Global Arts in Medicine Fellowship and all the wonderful work that you do to see what's next and where this story kind of goes next in its next form. So we're all very excited to see where it will evolve to. Okay, any final words, Kunle? We have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I would say I would go back to what Dr. Gbonjubola said earlier on, by quoting one of the things I said. Where and how you were born is not as important as why. And like I said, also, like, I believe in purpose, I believe in spirituality, I believe in faith. And I believe that, you know, we are all here for a purpose. We are here for something that is higher and bigger than all of us. So we need to find that thing, we need to discover it, and we need to harness it, and then we need to move forward with it. One of the things I will also say would be direct your energy where you want to go. Your energy is a currency. If you don't manage it, you will not be able to achieve much in your life or much in your journey. So send your energy in the direction of your journey. So my energy, you can see I'm very enthusiastic about art and health and everything. That's my energy. That's the direction. So now where are you sending your energy? Are you spending your energy angry? That's how you're spending your day. You're angry. So you don't want to end up as an angry person, right? Anger is there, but you can navigate those emotions, right? You're not your emotions, but even though they're part of you. So send your energy where you want it to go. Send your energy where you want to go. Two things to live with. Send your energy where you want it to go and send your energy where you want to go. Yeah, that's what I would say. That would be my own last word. Dr. Gbonju, over to you, please.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for the fantastic anchoring and for, Kunle, for speaking about sending your energy, because I have an assignment for you. The next place I would like that you send your energy to is that I would like very much that you start to mentor young males and females in troubled communities and troubled centers, not just in Nigeria, but all over the world. I know I had spoken to you, earlier on about this. And I think that, my own passion comes from the fact that I worked with the juvenile justice system. I worked with, disadvantaged children in the juvenile justice system whose stories, are similar to the kinds of stories that you have. And so as much as is possible, I would like that, look for some sort of mentorship, some sort of give back. While you may not be physically here present to do it, I believe that, there's a call upon your life. And I would say it again, because I've said it to you before. I think that, the last thing that I just want to say is Kunle continues to inspire, Kunle continues to innovate. And I'm hopeful that, a lot of us will continue to glean from his knowledge, will continue to celebrate the work that he does. But most importantly, that we would also see his life as a mirror that we also look into and reflect and ask ourselves, this is where I want to get to. But what have I done today to move me, a little closer? Hello, little young man. To move me a little closer to where exactly I want to be. And of course, I would always like to sign out with the fact that our mental health is important, our mental health matters, and that at all times, we must remember that there is indeed no health without mental health. Thank you.